Clara's hands trembled in the darkness of the iron cell, her fingers clutching the torn fabric of her mother's wedding dress, the only thing left from a life she'd tried to forget. Beyond the bars, Wade Sullivan stood with a loaded revolver pressed against his thigh, his eyes bloodshot from 3 sleepless nights. His knuckles were white around the cold metal. 2 miles away, 7-year-old Ellie burned with fever that climbed to 104 degrees. Her small voice calling out in delirium, "Mama Clara, don't leave me." The courthouse clock struck midnight. 8 hours until the trial. 8 hours until everything shattered beyond repair. Wade's finger moved toward the trigger. Clara closed her eyes, whispering a prayer she didn't believe would be heard. The jail cell smelled of rust and desperation. None of them knew that morning would bring a ghost back from the dead. But to understand how they reached this precipice, we must return 6 weeks earlier, when a battered wagon carrying a woman in rags first rolled through the gates of Sullivan Ranch. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments along with the city you're watching from. Now let's continue with the story. Wade Sullivan had stopped counting the days since Catherine died. 3 years blurred into one endless gray morning. Each sunrise a reminder of the woman he'd found hanging in the horse barn, their 5-year-old daughter screaming behind a locked door. The funeral had been brief. He'd buried Catherine's diary beneath the old oak tree without reading it, swearing he never would. For 2 years, he'd wandered through his own life like a ghost. The ranch fell into disrepair. Ellie stopped speaking for months. The silence in the house grew so thick it felt like drowning. Then one evening, Ellie had looked up from her untouched dinner and asked, "Why don't I have a mama like the other children?" That question broke something in Wade that grief hadn't managed to reach. He'd sat down that night, hands shaking, and written a letter to a mail-order bride agency back east. The whiskey helped him seal the envelope. The desperation helped him mail it. 1,500 miles away. Clara Bennett had spent 20 years learning that love was just another word for pain. At 8 years old, she'd hidden under the bed while her mother died under Daniel Bennett's fists. At 15, she'd tried running. He'd dragged her back and broken 3 of her ribs as punishment. At 20, she'd stopped hoping for rescue. But 3 months ago, on a train heading west, she'd met Sarah Mitchell, a gentle woman traveling to marry a rancher in Arizona Territory. They'd shared stories, bread, and something Clara had forgotten existed: friendship. When the fever took Sarah in a cramped rail car outside Kansas, Clara had held her hand through the final hours. Sarah's last words were barely a whisper. "Live for me. Please, take my papers. Be free." Clara had burned her old documents that night, watching 28 years of suffering turn to ash. She'd pulled on her mother's tattered wedding dress, the only inheritance she'd ever received, and taken Sarah's name like a lifeline. Now the wagon lurched to a stop in front of Sullivan Ranch, and Clara stepped down into the Arizona dust with nothing but a small cloth bag and a heart full of lies she told herself were mercy. Wade emerged from the house, and Clara watched his face fall. She saw herself through his eyes: filthy dress, worn boots, sun-darkened skin, calloused hands. Not the fresh-faced bride he'd imagined. Before either could speak, a small girl burst through the door. Ellie ran straight to Clara and grabbed her hand with both of hers. "You feel like my mama used to hold me," Ellie said, her voice filled with wonder. Clara dropped to her knees, and for the first time in 10 years, Tears came without permission. She wrapped her arms around this child she'd never met. This child who somehow recognized something true beneath all the lies. Wade stood frozen, watching his daughter smile for the first time since Catherine's death. Clara began working before dawn the next morning. Wade found her in the kitchen, flour dusting her worn sleeves as she kneaded bread dough with practiced efficiency. She didn't ask for new clothes or complain about the cramped room he'd given her. She simply worked. By the third day, Wade noticed the house had a different smell, not just clean, but lived in. Clara had scrubbed years of bachelor neglect from every corner, mended curtains he'd forgotten existed, and somehow coaxed life back into Catherine's long-dead herb garden. Her hands were cut and blistered, but she never mentioned it. On the fifth afternoon, he watched her handle the cattle with surprising skill. She moved among the animals without fear, her touch gentle but firm. When a calf kicked her shin hard enough to leave a bruise, she simply shifted her weight and continued working. No tears, no complaints, but it was the evenings that changed everything. Each night after dinner, Clara sat with Ellie by lamplight, teaching her letters and numbers with infinite patience. Wade would stand in the hallway, listening to his daughter's laughter, a sound he'd thought was buried with Catherine. "She pretends she can't ride," came a voice behind him one evening. Wade turned to find Nahilzai, the old Apache who'd been his wife's godfather, standing in the shadows. "What do you mean?" "Watched her yesterday. She checked the horse like someone who knows. Then she fumbled like someone who doesn't. Woman has secrets." Wade wanted to dismiss it, but the seed of doubt had been planted. He began watching Clara more carefully. The way she sometimes forgot to seem helpless. The slight hesitation before she answered questions about her past. The fact that her hands, though roughened by recent work, bore older scars, the kind that came from years of something harder than housework. The first letter arrived on a Tuesday. Clara's face went white when she saw the envelope, the handwriting bold and aggressive. She tucked it into her apron and disappeared. That night, Wade smelled smoke from the old stove and found her standing there, watching paper curl and blacken. "Bad news from home?" he asked. "No home to have news from," she'd replied, which wasn't quite an answer. The second letter came a week later. This time Wade glimpsed the words before Clara could hide it. "You owe me. I know where you are now." His suspicion grew into something harder. Clara was running from something or someone. The question was what, and whether it would follow her here. He sent his own letter to Boston, inquiring about Sarah Mitchell. The response would take weeks. But Wade needed to know who was really sleeping under his roof. Despite his doubts, Wade couldn't deny what Clara had brought to the ranch. Ellie had started eating full meals again. The child who'd been silent and withdrawn now chattered constantly, her small hand always reaching for Clara's. One evening, Wade found a drawing Ellie had made 4 stick figures labeled Pa, Mama Clara, Me, and floating above them, Mama Angel. His daughter had found a way to hold both mothers in her heart. The realization made his chest ache. Late one morning, Wade took Clara out to teach her about herding sheep, or so he claimed. As he guided her hands on the reins, their fingers touched. The contact lasted only a moment, but it sent electricity through his entire body. Clara's breath caught, and he knew she'd felt it too. They rode in silence after that. But it was a different kind of silence than before. That afternoon, while Clara mended his torn shirt, Ellie fell asleep in her lap. Wade stood in the doorway watching them, this makeshift family he'd accidentally created. Clara's fingers moved through Ellie's hair with such tenderness that Wade had to look away before the longing overwhelmed him. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for being kind to her." "She makes it easy," Clara replied, her voice thick. "She has your strength," and she hesitated, "and her mother's gentle spirit." It was the first time Clara had acknowledged Catherine, and Wade was surprised to find it didn't hurt as much as he'd expected. That evening, they sat by the fire after Ellie had gone to bed. Clara told stories about her childhood, carefully edited versions that Wade suspected left out more than they included. She mentioned a mother who'd loved wildflowers, a brother she'd lost track of long ago. When pressed for details, she'd changed the subject so smoothly he almost didn't notice. "You're good at not answering questions," Wade observed. Clara's hands stilled on the sewing in her lap. Some things are better left in the past, and some things have a way of catching up. Their eyes met across the firelight. Clara looked like she wanted to say something, but fear held her silent. Wade wanted to push, to demand the truth, but something stopped him. Maybe it was the way her fingers trembled slightly. Maybe it was the old bruises he'd noticed on her wrists, faded but still visible. Maybe it was simply that he was starting to care more than was wise. One night, Wade found himself standing outside Clara's door, his hand on the knob. He could smell the faint scent of lavender soap she'd made through the thin wood. He heard her crying softly, the kind of crying someone does when they're trying desperately not to be heard. He stood there for a long time, his forehead pressed against the doorframe, wanting to comfort her, but not knowing how, not knowing if he had the right. The next morning, Wade discovered his old rifle and his father's pocket watch missing from the study. He found the receipt at the bottom of the drawer. Clara had sold them to the trader in town. The money, every cent of it, was in an envelope marked for Ellie's medicine fund. Ellie had been fighting a persistent cough. The doctor had recommended expensive tonics. Wade hadn't mentioned the cost. But somehow Clara had known. He confronted her that evening. "You had no right." "I know," Clara said simply, "but she needed it." "With what money? Where did you—" Wade stopped himself. The truth clicked into place. The small cloth bag Clara never let out of her sight. The way she'd paid off the ranch debt, she had money, perhaps a lot of it, hidden away. "Who are you, really?" Wade asked, his voice barely a whisper. Clara's composure finally cracked. "Someone trying to be better than who I was." Something shifted in the house over the following weeks. Wade caught himself calling Clara "my wife" when talking to Nahilzai, the words slipping out before he could stop them. He'd pause, expecting to feel guilt, but instead found only a strange sense of rightness. Clara had begun planting wildflowers around the porch, delicate yellow blooms that Wade recognized with a jolt. They were the same flowers Catherine had loved, the ones she'd tried and failed to grow in the harsh Arizona soil. Somehow, Clara had coaxed them to thrive. "How did you know?" Wade asked one evening, watching her water them carefully. Clara's hand stilled. "Know what?" "That these were her favorites." "I didn't," Clara said softly. "They were my mother's favorites too. I thought maybe she'd appreciate them." Your wife. I mean, a way to honor her memory. The gesture moved Wade more than any words could have. Clara wasn't trying to replace Catherine. She was trying to make room for both of them. One stormy night, thunder cracked so loud it shook the house. Ellie's screams pierced through the walls. Wade was halfway to her room when he heard Clara's voice, soft and melodic, singing a lullaby. He stood frozen in the hallway, listening. The tune was achingly familiar. It was the same song Catherine used to sing, though Clara couldn't possibly have known that. Through the crack in the door, he watched Clara rock Ellie gently, the child's arms wrapped tight around her neck. "Mama Clara," Ellie whispered, the name coming naturally. "Don't leave me like Mama Angel did." Clara's voice broke. "I won't, sweetheart. I promise I won't." Wade had to walk away before they heard him crying. 2 days later, under the old oak tree where Catherine's diary lay buried. Clara stumbled while carrying water for the new calves. Wade caught her before she fell, his hands steady on her waist. They stood like that for a moment, close enough that he could count the gold flecks in her brown eyes. "Clara," he breathed, and then he was kissing her. It was clumsy and uncertain, weighted with guilt and longing and 3 years of loneliness. Clara responded with equal desperation, her fingers clutching his shirt like she was drowning, and he was air. When they broke apart, both were trembling. "We shouldn't," Clara whispered, but her hand remained on his chest, feeling his racing heartbeat. "I know," Wade replied, though he made no move to step away. They stood in the shadow of his dead wife's resting place, alive in ways neither had been in years, terrified that this fragile happiness would shatter if they looked at it too closely. The first trip to town changed everything. Wade needed supplies, and Clara offered to come along. Ellie insisted on joining them, skipping between her parents with innocent joy. Inside the general store, Margaret Ashford stood behind the counter, her eyes narrowing as they entered. She was a handsome woman in her 40s, recently widowed and wealthy, who'd made her interest in Wade painfully obvious since Catherine's death. Well, Margaret said loudly, ensuring everyone in the store could hear. "If it isn't the mail-order beggar. Tell me, Clara, did the agency have a damaged goods section?" Several women tittered. Clara's spine straightened, but she said nothing, moving past to gather flour and sugar. "Wade, darling," Margaret continued, her voice dripping false sweetness. "Surely you could have afforded better. Catherine must be rolling in her grave, knowing you replaced her with that." Wade's jaw clenched, but before he could speak, Ellie's small voice rang out. "Mama Clara is worth 10 of you, Mrs. Ashford." Margaret's face flushed crimson. "How dare that child?" "She's right," Wade said quietly, dangerously. "You'll apologize to my wife, Margaret?" "Now." Margaret laughed sharply. "Your wife, she's a charity case who showed up in rags. Everyone knows she's only here because she had nowhere else to go." Wade took a step forward, but Clara's hand on his arm stopped him. "Thank you for your time, Mrs. Ashford," Clara said with perfect dignity. "We'll take our business elsewhere." As they left, Wade heard the women's voices follow them. Poor Wade, saddled with that. Catherine would be ashamed. He deserved so much better. In the wagon, Clara sat rigid, her hands folded in her lap. Ellie was crying quietly. Wade wanted to say something, anything, but the words stuck in his throat. His silence felt like betrayal. That night, Nahilzai appeared at the ranch. He spoke to Clara in rapid Apache, and to Wade's shock, Clara responded fluently. The old man nodded with satisfaction before switching to English. "She carries warrior scars," Nahilzai told Wade. "You judge her for arriving in rags. She walked through fire to get here." After Nahilzai left, Wade found Clara on the porch. "You speak Apache?" "My foster mother, after my real mother died, was Apache. Before..." Clara's voice trailed off. "Before things got bad again." Wade wanted to ask more, but something in her expression stopped him. There were wounds there too deep to probe. The financial troubles came to a head when the letter from the bank arrived. Wade read it alone in his study, the words blurring. "Final notice, $800 due within 60 days, or the property will be seized." He'd been managing, barely, before the drought last season. Now there was no way out. He'd have to sell the ranch his grandfather had built, the only home Ellie had ever known. Wade didn't tell Clara. He couldn't bear to add that burden to everything else, but Clara had a way of knowing things. That night, he caught her reading the bank letter he'd left on his desk. "How long have you known?" she asked quietly. "Does it matter? I can help?" "No." Wade's pride flared. "I won't take your money. Clara, I won't be that kind of man, even if it means losing Ellie's home." The words hit like a physical blow. Wade slumped into his chair, suddenly exhausted. "I've already sold everything I can, my father's guns, the horses we could spare. It's not enough. It's never enough." A third letter arrived 2 days later. This one addressed to Clara. Wade saw her face drain of color as she read it. The handwriting was aggressive, angry slashes across the page. She burned it immediately. But not before Wade glimpsed a few words, "Found you," and $500. Someone was hunting her. Someone who demanded money. Wade's suspicions crystallized into certainty Clara was running from something, or someone, dangerous. The investigator appeared in town that same week, asking questions about a woman with dark hair, traveling alone, probably using a false name. The shopkeeper mentioned it to Wade casually, not knowing the danger those words carried. Wade confronted Clara that evening. "There's a man looking for you. A detective." Clara's cups shattered on the floor. "No. No. He can't have found me already." "Who?" "Clara, who's after you?" But she was already running to her room, and Wade heard the lock click shut. Meanwhile, Ellie had developed a persistent cough. The doctor visited and prescribed expensive medicines, $50 that Wade didn't have. He sat up that night, staring at the bill, trying to figure out which piece of the ranch he could sell next. The next morning, Nahilzai arrived with money in hand. "From Clara," he said simply, "for the child's medicine." Wade wanted to refuse, but Ellie's health hung in the balance. He took the money with shame burning in his throat, knowing Clara had somehow sacrificed part of her hidden resources to save his daughter. That afternoon, Margaret Ashford visited the ranch uninvited. She found Wade in the barn and made her offer plain. "I'll pay off all your debts, Wade, every penny, $2,000. "I'm not interested in your charity, Margaret." "It's not charity. It's an investment." Margaret stepped closer. "All you have to do is send that woman away and marry me instead. I'll give Ellie a proper mother. You'll keep your ranch. And we'll forget this whole sordid episode ever happened. Wade's hand moved before his mind caught up, the slap echoing through the barn. Get off my property. And if you ever speak about my wife like that again, you'll regret it. Margaret's eyes filled with fury and something uglier, vengeance. You'll regret this. Wade Sullivan. Mark my words. As she rode away, Wade knew he'd made a powerful enemy. But for the first time in 3 years, he felt like himself again. The letter from Boston arrived on a Tuesday morning while Clara was hanging laundry. Wade stood in his study, staring at the official letterhead from the mail-order bride agency, his hands beginning to shake. We regret to inform you that Miss Sarah Mitchell passed away 3 months ago from typhoid fever during her journey west. Her body was buried in Kansas. We apologize for any confusion, as we were not immediately notified of her death. The words swam before Wade's eyes. 3 months ago. Clara had been living in his home for nearly 6 weeks, which meant the woman he'd kissed beneath the oak tree, the woman his daughter called Mama, the woman he was falling in love with, was someone else entirely. He checked Clara's papers, the ones she'd shown him when she arrived. All of them bore the name Sarah Mitchell. Every single document was a lie. Wade found Clara in the kitchen, kneading bread dough, flour dusting her cheeks. She looked up with a smile that died when she saw his face. "Who are you?" His voice came out strangled. "Sarah Mitchell is dead. She died 3 months ago in Kansas." All color drained from Clara's face. The truth was written there in her stricken expression, in the way her hands went slack, in the bread dough falling forgotten to the floor. "Wade, please, let me explain. Explain that I invited a liar into my home, that I let a fraud near my daughter." His voice rose with each word, he couldn't finish, couldn't say that he'd started to love her. "My name is Clara Bennett," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Sarah and I met on the train. She was dying. Wade, the fever had her. She made me promise, she begged me to take her place, to have the life she couldn't. So you stole a dead woman's identity. I was running." The words burst from Clara like a dam breaking. "Running from a man who beat my mother to death in front of me when I was 8 years old. A man who kept me prisoner for 20 years. Sarah gave me a chance to be free. She wanted me to have it. Her last words were, 'Live for me.' Wade wanted to believe her. God, how he wanted to believe her. But the betrayal cut too deep. You lied to me. Every day, every moment, you lied." "I know." Tears streamed down Clara's face. "I know, and I'm sorry, but everything else was real. My feelings for Ellie, for this place, She stopped herself. "For what, for me?" Wade's laugh was bitter. "How can I believe anything you say?" The sound of footsteps made them both turn. Ellie stood in the doorway, her face crumpling as she tried to understand what she'd heard. "Mama Clara." The child's voice was small, frightened. "Are you leaving?" Clara dropped to her knees, reaching for Ellie, but Wade stepped between them. "Go to your room, Ellie." "Papa, no, don't send her away." "Now, Ellie." The child ran, her sobs echoing through the house. Wade and Clara stood in the wreckage of their makeshift family, and Wade couldn't find words that didn't taste like ashes. "I need time to think," he finally said. "Sleep in the spare room tonight. Just don't talk to me right now." Clara nodded, her face a mask of grief. Wade, I never meant to hurt you. But you did. That night. Wade sat beneath the oak tree, a shovel in his hands. He'd sworn never to read Catherine's diary. But now everything he thought he knew was a lie. Maybe it was time for more truth. No matter how painful. The leather journal was wrapped in oilcloth, preserved despite 3 years underground. Wade's hands trembled as he opened it, Catherine's elegant handwriting blurring through his tears. The early entries were happy their courtship, their wedding, the joy of Ellie's birth. But then the tone shifted. Catherine wrote of darkness creeping in, of feeling hollow, of crying for reasons she couldn't name. The second baby died today. A boy. Wade tried to comfort me, but I can't be comforted. There's something broken inside me that can't be fixed. Wade's chest constricted. He'd known about the miscarriage, but he hadn't known the depth of Catherine's pain. The entries grew darker. I can't eat, can't sleep, can't stop seeing the baby's face. Wade is so patient, but I'm drowning and I don't know how to tell him. Then came the entry that stopped Wade's heart. I have to tell the truth before I lose my courage. Ellie isn't Wade's daughter. She's John's, my old sweetheart from back east. I was already pregnant when Wade and I married. I thought I could pass her off as premature, and he believed me. He's been raising another man's child all this time, and he doesn't know. God forgive me. But I can't tell him. It would destroy him. Wade couldn't breathe. Ellie, his daughter, his entire world, not his blood. The betrayal should have gutted him, but instead, something unexpected happened. He thought of Ellie's laugh, her small hand in his, the way she called him Papa with absolute trust. He thought of all the nights he'd rocked her to sleep, all the tears he'd dried, all the scraped knees he'd bandaged. Biology didn't make him her father. Love did. Choice did. Just like Clara had chosen to stay, chosen to love them, chosen to be part of their family, even if it began with a lie. The final entry was dated the day Catherine died. I can't fight anymore. The darkness won. Wade, if you ever read this, it wasn't your fault. You loved me better than I deserved. Please don't let guilt destroy you the way it destroyed me. Find happiness again. Find love. You deserve it. Tell Ellie her mother loved her, even though I couldn't show it at the end. Be happy, my darling. That's all I ever wanted for you. Wade sat in the dirt, clutching the diary, understanding for the first time that Catherine's death wasn't something he could have prevented. She'd been fighting a battle he couldn't see, against an enemy he couldn't fight. And now Clara, broken. Scared Clara, who'd run from her own demons, had brought light back into their lives. She'd loved Ellie like her own. She'd loved him, imperfect and grieving. And he'd thrown it back in her face. Wade ran toward the house, the diary still in his hands, desperate to tell Clara that he understood, that they were both just damaged people trying to do better, that he forgave her. But when he reached Clara's room, it was empty. On the pillow lay a note in her careful handwriting. You and Ellie deserve better than a woman built on lies. The money under the pillow will pay your debts. Live well, be happy. I love you both. Beneath the pillow, Wade found $800 in gold coins. Clara was gone. From Ellie's room came a sound that turned his blood to ice, his daughter's voice. weak and confused. "Papa, I don't feel good. Papa, I'm so hot." He ran to her side. Ellie's skin burned beneath his touch, her eyes glassy with fever. The thermometer read 102 degrees and climbing. "It's okay, baby," Wade whispered, though panic clawed at his throat. "Papa's here. Everything's going to be okay." But as he held his feverish daughter, the woman he loved disappearing into the night, Wade wasn't sure he believed his own words anymore. Wade rode through 3 days of dust and desperation, searching every road, every town, every place Clara might have run. The ranch hands watched Ellie while he scoured the territory, asking questions, showing the one photograph he had of her. No one had seen a woman matching her description. On the 4th morning, Nahilzai appeared at the ranch as Wade was saddling his horse for another fruitless search. "You ride in circles," the old Apache said. "Come, I know where she is." Nahilzai led him beyond the town limits, past the place where civilized Arizona gave way to Apache territory. There, among a cluster of traditional dwellings, Wade found Clara kneeling beside a sick child, pressing a cool cloth to the boy's forehead. She wore a simple Apache dress, her hair braided in the traditional style. She looked like she belonged there, in a way she'd never quite belonged in his world. She looked up as his shadow fell across her. The hope in her eyes nearly broke him. "Come home," Wade said. "I can't." Clara's voice was steady, but her hands trembled. "You deserve someone honest, Wade. Someone who didn't start everything with a lie." "I read Catherine's diary." Clara went still. "She told me things, hard things, about herself, about Ellie." Wade dismounted, moving closer. "She wasn't perfect either. None of us are. But she told me something else in those pages. She told me to live, to find happiness, to let go of the past. Wade, you took Sarah's name because you were running from hell. I understand that now. You didn't steal her identity, she gave it to you. A dying woman's last gift." He knelt in the dirt beside her. "Catherine gave me a gift too, in those final words. She gave me permission to love again. And I choose you. Clara, whatever your name is, whoever you were, I choose who you are now." Tears streaked through the dust on Clara's cheeks. "You don't know everything. There are things coming. Dangerous things. Then we'll face them together." Wade cupped her face in his hands and kissed her like he should have done weeks ago, without hesitation, without reservation. Clara kissed him back desperately. Her fingers tangled in his shirt. When they broke apart, Nahilzai was smiling. "About damn time," the old man muttered. The ride back to the ranch felt like coming home. Ellie was awake when they arrived, her fever broken, and she ran to Clara with such force she nearly knocked them both over. "You came back, Papa said you would. And you did." Clara held the child tight, breathing in the scent of her hair. "I'm sorry I left, sweetheart. I won't do it again. Promise." "Promise." That evening, Wade rode into town with Clara beside him. He helped her down from the wagon in the middle of Main Street, where everyone could see, and took her hand firmly in his. "This is Clara Bennett," he announced to anyone within earshot. "My wife, and anyone who has a problem with that can take it up with me." Margaret Ashford stood in the doorway of her store, her face twisted with fury. Several townspeople whispered, but others, the blacksmith, the doctor, Old Mrs. Chen from the boarding house nodded with approval. At the bank, Wade laid Clara's gold coins on the counter. This pays off the Sullivan Ranch debt, in full. The banker counted carefully, then stamped the papers. You're clear, Mr. Sullivan. Congratulations. Walking out of that bank, debt-free for the first time in 3 years. Wade felt lighter than air. That night, he gave Clara a new ring, a simple silver band he'd had the jeweler make, engraved with both their initials. Not Catherine's ring. A fresh start. It's beautiful, Clara whispered. You're beautiful. For one perfect week, they were happy. Truly. Impossibly happy. Ellie drew pictures of their family without the ghost of Mama Angel hovering above. Clara tended her flowers and helped with the cattle. Wade caught himself whistling while he worked. They were building something real. Something that might actually last. Then the investigator returned. Wade spotted him talking to Margaret Ashford outside the general store. Money changing hands. His blood went cold. Whatever information the man had about Clara, Margaret now owned it. 2 days later, an official-looking letter arrived from the Boston Police Department. Wade read it with growing dread. Daniel Bennett, resident of Boston, has filed a report regarding his missing daughter, Clara Bennett, age 28. He is traveling to Arizona Territory to retrieve her and bring her home. Any assistance you can provide would be appreciated. Clara's face went white when Wade showed her. No, he can't have found me. How did he, Margaret? Wade said grimly. She paid the investigator. She's been working against us this whole time. The next blow came from Sheriff Frank Cooper, who arrived at the ranch with a smug expression. Mrs. Sullivan, or should I say, Miss Bennett, I have here a complaint filed by Mrs. Margaret Ashford. She claims you're using false documentation and have committed fraud. I'm afraid I'll need you to come with me for questioning. She's not going anywhere, Wade said, stepping between them. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Sullivan. The law is the law. The law can wait until we have proper representation. Or are you so deep in Margaret's pocket you've forgotten how justice actually works? Frank's hand moved to his pistol. Careful how you talk to me, boy. Before the standoff could escalate. Ellie's scream cut through the tension. Wade ran to the house, his heart in his throat. Ellie was convulsing on the floor, her small body racked with fever. The thermometer Wade pressed to her forehead read 104 degrees. Her skin burned like fire under his hands. Get the doctor, Wade shouted. Now. The doctor arrived within the hour, his examination grim. Pneumonia. Severe. She needs surgery, or the infection will spread to her lungs completely. Then do the surgery. Mr. Sullivan, the procedure costs $500, and even then, it's risky. She's very weak. $500 they'd just spent paying off the ranch debt. Wade felt the walls closing in. How long do we have? 5 days, maybe less. After that, the doctor didn't need to finish. Clara grabbed Wade's arm. We'll figure it out. We have to. But there was more. Frank Cooper reappeared that evening with papers. Clara Bennett, you're under arrest for identity fraud and theft of documents. You have 72 hours before I'm legally obligated to take you into custody. You can't. Ellie's weak voice came from her bedroom. You can't take Mama Clara. I'm sorry, little one. It's out of my hands. But Frank's smile said he wasn't sorry at all. After he left, Wade and Clara sat at the kitchen table, the weight of impossible choices crushing them. 3 separate clocks were ticking down, and they didn't have enough time or money or hope to stop any of them. "Daniel will be here in 10 days, Clara said quietly. "The sheriff arrests me in 3. Ellie needs surgery in 5. She looked at Wade with hollow eyes. "There's no way out of this." Nahilzai appeared in the doorway like a ghost. "The white man you fear is not coming for his daughter. He's coming to destroy everything she's built. I've seen men like him. They don't forgive, they don't forget, and they don't stop." Wade pulled Clara close, feeling her shake against him. "I won't let him take you. I won't let any of them win." But as Ellie's labored breathing echoed from the next room, Wade wasn't sure how to keep that promise. Daniel Bennett arrived on the 7th day, riding a black horse with 2 hired guns flanking him. He was a tall man with iron-gray hair and a scar that twisted from his left eye to his jaw. His presence carried the weight of violence, barely restrained. Wade was mending fence when he saw them approach. He walked back to the house slowly, deliberately, his hand near the rifle he'd started carrying. Clara stood on the porch, frozen, all color drained from her face. Well, Daniel called out, dismounting with practiced ease. "Quite a chase you've given me, girl. Cost me a pretty penny tracking you down." "Get off my land," Wade said, his voice deadly calm. Daniel laughed, a sound like gravel scraping stone. "Your land, son. I'm here for what's mine. That woman there is my daughter, and she's coming home." "I'm not your daughter," Clara said, her voice shaking but clear. "You're not my father. You never were. Doesn't matter what blood says. I raised you, fed you, kept a roof over your head for 20 years. You owe me. You beat my mother to death." Clara's voice cracked. "You kept me prisoner. Now, that's a harsh word. I provided discipline, same as any good father would." Daniel's smile was cruel. "But we can discuss that on the train back to Boston, unless this cowboy wants to pay what you owe me. $1,000, and I'll forget I ever had a daughter." Wade's hand moved to his rifle. "The only thing you're getting is a bullet if you don't leave." Big talk from a man who's about to lose his child. Daniel nodded toward the house. "I hear your little girl is sick, real sick, needs an expensive surgery. How about this, you give me Clara, and I'll give you the money for the operation. Fair trade. Wouldn't you say, go to hell, suit yourself, but when that child dies, you'll know you chose pride over her life." Daniel signaled his men. "Come on, Clara. Time to go home. She's not going anywhere with you." "Then I suppose we'll let the law decide." Daniel pulled out official-looking papers. "I've got documentation here saying Clara Bennett is a fugitive. Stole property from me, including a substantial sum of money. The sheriff's already been paid to see things my way." Wade's jaw clenched. Of course, Daniel had bought off Frank Cooper. That was how men like him operated, with money and threats and the law twisted to their purposes. Before anyone could move, another figure appeared on the road. Reverend Thomas Hayes approached on foot, his Bible in hand. But his expression was harder than Wade had ever seen it. "Daniel Bennett," Thomas said, his voice carrying strange authority. "You have no claim here." Daniel squinted. "Who the hell are you?" "Someone who's been looking for you for 25 years. Thomas stepped closer, And Wade saw something flicker in Clara's eyes, recognition, confusion, hope. "My name is Thomas Bennett. I'm Clara's brother." The world seemed to tilt. Clara staggered, Wade catching her elbow. "Thomas." Her voice was barely a whisper. "Thomas, you're alive. I never stopped looking for you and Mother," Thomas said, his eyes never leaving Daniel. "Not after this man took you both." Daniel's face darkened. "That's a lie. Mary was my wife. Mary Walsh was a widow with 2 children when you met her. She married you thinking you'd provide stability. Instead, you isolated her, controlled her. And when she tried to leave, you killed her." Thomas pulled documents from his coat. "I have the marriage certificate. Mary Walsh, widow, with 2 children, Thomas, age 15, and Clara, age 5. You're not her father, Daniel. You're her captor." Clara's legs gave out. Wade held her as sobs racked her body, not grief, but the release of a burden she'd carried for 23 years. "You can't prove anything," Daniel snarled. "I can prove everything. I've spent 2 decades gathering evidence. Witnesses who remember Mary trying to escape. Medical records showing Clara's injuries, and I have this." Thomas held up a faded photograph. "Mother and both her children, taken a month before you made them disappear." Wade looked at the photo. A younger Thomas, a woman who looked heartbreakingly like Clara, and a small girl with Clara's eyes. Daniel's hand moved toward his gun. "Doesn't matter what you can prove. I've got the law on my side, and I've got men with guns. Clara's coming with me, one way or another. Over my dead body," Wade said. "That can be arranged." The sound of a hammer cocking froze everyone. Ellie stood in the doorway, Wade's old pistol held in her trembling hands. Her face was pale, fever-bright, but her voice was strong. "You're not taking my mama?" "Ellie, put the gun down," Wade said carefully. "No, I heard what he said. He wants to hurt her. I won't let him." Ellie's hands shook violently. "I won't." Daniel laughed. "The sick kid's going to shoot me. That's rich." "She doesn't have to." Thomas stepped between Daniel and the house. "Daniel Bennett, in the name of the law and in the presence of these witnesses, I'm making a citizen's arrest for the murder of Mary Bennett and the kidnapping and assault of Clara Bennett. You're a preacher, not a lawman. You've got no authority. Then I suppose we'll have a problem." Thomas's voice dropped. "Because I'm not letting you leave with her. None of us are." Nahilzai emerged from the barn, a rifle in his hands. "The Reverend speaks truth. You'll leave this place empty-handed or not at all." The standoff held for a long, terrible moment. Daniel's men shifted nervously. Outnumbered and facing a half-dead child with a gun, a preacher with righteous fury, an old Apache with steady aim, and a cowboy who looked ready to die fighting. Then Sheriff Frank Cooper's voice cut through the tension. "Everyone lower your weapons, now." Frank rode up with 2 deputies, his expression smug. "Daniel Bennett, I'm told you have legal custody papers for Clara Bennett." "That's right, Sheriff." Daniel's smile returned. "All nice and legal. And Thomas Hayes, you claim to be her brother. I am her brother." Frank dismounted, looking between them. "Well, this is quite the situation. But the law is clear. Without proof that Mr. Bennett's custody is invalid, I have to side with the documented guardian." "I have proof," Thomas insisted, "which will take time to verify. Meanwhile, The girl comes with her legal guardian. Frank turned to Wade. And you, Sullivan. I'm arresting for assault on Mr. Bennett and obstruction of justice. I never touched him. Yet. Frank's smile was vicious. But you were about to. I saw it. My deputies saw it. You pulled a weapon on an unarmed man. That's assault where I come from. It was a setup. Margaret had paid Frank well, and he was playing his part perfectly. Wait. Clara stepped forward. I'll go. I'll go with the sheriff. Face the charges. Just leave Wade and Ellie alone. No. Wade grabbed her arm. Clara, don't. It's the only way. If you're arrested, we'll take care of Ellie. She needs you. She needs the surgery. Clara's eyes brimmed with tears. Please, Wade. Let me do this one thing right. How noble, Daniel sneered. But I don't think... Shut up, Bennett, Frank snapped. Clara Bennett, you're under arrest for identity fraud and theft of legal documents. You'll be held until trial. He pulled out iron shackles. Give me your hands. Wade wanted to fight. Wanted to shoot every man standing in his yard. Wanted to burn the world down rather than watch them take her. But Ellie collapsed in the doorway, the gun falling from her hands as she crumpled. Ellie. Wade ran to his daughter, catching her before she hit the ground. Her skin was fire-hot, her breathing shallow. The child needs a doctor, Nahilzai said urgently. Then you better get her one, Frank said, locking the shackles around Clara's wrists. Come on, Miss Bennett. You've got a cell waiting. Clara looked back at Wade holding their daughter, her face a portrait of devastation. Save her. Promise me you'll save her. I'll get you out. Wade called. I swear. Clara, I'll get you out. The surgery, Wade. She has to have the surgery. That's all that matters. As Frank led Clara away, Daniel mounted his horse with a satisfied smile. I'll be waiting when she gets out of jail. Cowboy. She'll be coming home with me eventually. Might as well get used to it. Thomas stepped forward. I won't let that happen. You in what army, preacher? God's army, and I've waited 25 years for justice. I can wait a little longer. After they left, Wade held Ellie in his arms as she burned with fever, watching the dust cloud from the sheriff's wagon disappear. Nahilzai stood beside him, ancient and grieving. The child has perhaps 3 days, the old Apache said quietly. After that, no surgery will help. Wade looked down at Ellie's pale face, then toward the town where Clara sat in a cell waiting for a trial that would never be fair. 2 people he loved, both slipping away, and him powerless to save either. I won't lose them both, Wade said. I won't. But as the sun set on the Sullivan Ranch, painting the sky the color of blood, Wade had no idea how to keep that promise. The next 48 hours became a descent into hell. Wade counted what remained of Clara's gold $450. The surgery cost $500. He was $50 short of saving his daughter's life. He sold the last horse worth anything, his grandfather's pocket watch, the silver candlesticks Catherine's mother had given them. It still wasn't enough. $43, still 7 short. Nahilzai found him in the barn at midnight, sitting in the dark with his head in his hands. How much do you need? The old Apache asked. $7, $7 goddamn dollars. And I can't. Wade's voice broke. Nahilzai was silent for a long moment. Then, I have land. Sacred land, where my ancestors are buried. The railroad wants it. They've offered $50. I can't ask you to do that. You're not asking. I'm offering. Nahilzai's weathered hand gripped Wade's shoulder. That child in there is the future. The dead will understand. The next morning, Nahilzai signed papers that broke his heart, selling the last piece of Apache territory his family had held for 200 years. The railroad man paid in cash, and Wade held the money like it was made of blood. The surgeon operated that afternoon. 6 hours of waiting, pacing, praying to a God Wade wasn't sure was listening. When the doctor finally emerged, blood on his apron, Wade couldn't breathe. She's alive. The surgery was successful, but she's very weak. The next few days will tell us if her body can recover. Wade collapsed against the wall, relief and exhaustion warring in his chest. Ellie was alive. She had a chance. But Clara sat in a jail cell, and her trial was set for the following morning. In that cold cell, Clara hadn't eaten in 2 days. The darkness pressed in from all sides, and she could hear rats skittering in the corners. Sheriff Cooper had made sure she understood this was punishment, not just detention. Daniel visited her the second night, his leg bandaged from Wade's bullet, but his smile intact. Could have avoided all this, he said through the bars. You just had to come home quietly. This isn't about taking me home. It's about controlling me. It always was. Smart girl. Too smart for your own good. Daniel leaned closer. Here's what's going to happen. You'll be found guilty tomorrow. 10 years in a women's prison back east. But I'll make the judge an offer release you into my custody instead. Either way, you're mine again. After he left, Clara sat in the dark, holding the scrap of her mother's wedding dress she'd managed to hide in her sleeve. She thought about the horse barn at the ranch, about Catherine's choice, about how sometimes the pain became too much to carry. She remembered her mother's voice from long ago. You must live, Clara. No matter how hard it gets, you must live. But for what Wade would care for Ellie? Thomas had found her, could tell her story. She'd served her purpose. Maybe it was time to stop running, stop fighting, stop hurting everyone she touched. Clara found a nail protruding from the wall. It would be quick. No one would stop her. By morning, Daniel would have nothing to claim, and Wade could move on with his life. She pressed the sharp point against her wrist, feeling the cold metal dimple her skin. Then she thought of Ellie's face. The way the child had said, Mama Clara, with such trust. The promise Clara had made, I won't leave you. Clara set the nail down, hands shaking. She pulled her hair loose and, using the nail's sharp edge, began cutting. Long dark strands fell around her feet, Apache tradition. A final gift to the living when one expected to die. She'd leave the hair for Ellie, something to remember her by. She wrote a letter by the thin moonlight coming through the window. My dearest Wade and Ellie, I'm sorry for all the lies, all the pain. But loving you both was the truest thing I've ever done. Wade raised Ellie to be brave. Ellie, remember that families are built from choice, not blood. I chose you both. That was real. Clara. Meanwhile, Wade left Ellie in Nahilzai's care and rode for town. Thomas met him at the church, both men exhausted but determined. We need proof that Daniel's custody claim is fraudulent, Wade said. I have documents, but we need official verification. The county recorder's office has the original marriage certificate for my mother and her first husband, Clara's real father. It proves Daniel had no legal claim to her. They rode to the records office and found the clerk resistant. Can't just hand over documents to anyone who asks. Wade pulled out his last $20. Consider this a filing fee. The clerk pocketed the money and produced a dusty ledger. There it was. Mary Walsh, widow of James Walsh, mother to Thomas James Walsh and Clara Mary Walsh, married Daniel Joseph Bennett. This proves she had children from a previous marriage, Thomas said. Daniel wasn't their father, just their mother's husband. When Mary died, he had no legal custody. Will it hold up in court? It has to. But when they tried to leave with the documents, they found Daniel waiting outside with his hired guns. Looking for something, gentlemen. The confrontation turned physical fast. Wade threw the first punch, decades of rage behind it. Daniel was bigger, meaner, but Wade fought with the desperation of a man with nothing left to lose. They crashed through the window of the saloon next door, trading blows that left both men bloody. "She's mine," Daniel roared, slamming Wade against the bar. "She's no one's property." Wade drove his knee into Daniel's wounded leg, making him scream. Sheriff Cooper arrived with his deputies, pulling them apart. "Wade Sullivan, you're under arrest for assault. He started it. I saw you throw the first punch. That's assault." Frank smiled, enjoying this. "Take him in, boys." Wade fought, but 3 deputies overpowered him. They threw him in the cell next to Clara's, through the bars separating them. Wade and Clara stared at each other. Her shorn hair shocked him. She'd cut it close to her skull, the long locks he'd loved to watch in the sunlight gone. "What did you do?" Wade whispered. "Apache tradition. For Ellie. So she'll have something of me." "Don't talk like that. We're getting out of this." "How?" "Wade, how exactly are we getting out?" Clara's laugh was bitter. "You're in jail. I'm in jail. Thomas is one man against a corrupt sheriff and a judge in Margaret's pocket. Ellie's recovering but needs you. There's no way out." "I don't accept that." "You have to." Clara reached through the bars, her fingers barely touching his. "Promise me you'll take care of Ellie. That's all that matters now. Both of you matter. I was always going to lose this fight. I knew it when I saw Daniel ride up. Men like him always win." Wade gripped her hand tighter. "I won't let him win. I'll tear this whole town apart first. And go to prison for murder. Leave Ellie an orphan, no." Clara pulled her hand back. "I need you to promise you'll let me go if that's what saves you and Ellie." "I can't promise that." "Then I'm asking anyway." They sat in darkness, separated by iron bars and impossible choices, listening to each other breathe until dawn came with its terrible promises. Morning brought the trial. The courtroom was packed. Half the town had come to watch the spectacle. Judge William Pritchard presided, a man everyone knew Margaret Ashford had in her pocket. Frank Cooper stood as the prosecuting witness. Clara Bennett stands accused of identity fraud, theft of legal documents, and conspiracy to defraud. The judge announced. Margaret sat in the front row, her smile triumphant. Daniel stood as the primary witness against Clara, his testimony painting her as a thief and a liar. Several townspeople who'd never spoken to Clara claimed she'd acted suspiciously, that they'd always known something was wrong. Thomas tried to present his evidence, but Judge Pritchard kept ruling it inadmissible on technicalities. The court recognizes Daniel Bennett as Clara's legal guardian, Pritchard announced. He's not her father. Thomas shouted. He was married to her mother, which gives him custody rights. Your documents don't change that. The doctor testified that Clara's gold had saved Ellie's life, but Pritchard dismissed it as irrelevant. Nahilzai stood to speak, and the judge cut him off. Apache testimony isn't recognized in this court. Sit down. You call this justice? Nahilzai's voice was thunder. You white men and your laws that exist only to protect the wicked. Bailiff, remove him. As they dragged Nahilzai out, the judge turned to Clara. Clara Bennett, I find you guilty of all charges. I sentence you to... The courtroom doors burst open. A small figure stumbled through Ellie, her hospital gown stained with blood from torn stitches, her face gray with exhaustion. No. Ellie's voice cracked. You can't take my mama, you can't... She collapsed in the aisle, her small body crumpling like a broken doll. Wade roared from where the deputies held him, fighting to reach his daughter. Clara screamed. The courtroom erupted into chaos. As the doctor rushed to Ellie's side, everyone froze, watching the child who'd quite possibly just killed herself trying to save the woman she loved. The judge's gavel fell, but the sound was lost in the terrible silence that followed. The courtroom doors opened again, and a thin woman entered. Leaning heavily on a walking stick, her face was gaunt, her body frail, but her eyes were clear and determined. Stop this trial, she said, her voice carrying despite its weakness. I'm Sarah Mitchell. The room went utterly silent. Every head turned. Clara's face drained of color. Wade stopped struggling against the deputies. Judge Pritchard recovered first. That's impossible. Sarah Mitchell died months ago. I nearly did. Sarah moved slowly down the aisle, each step clearly painful. Typhoid fever put me in a coma for 3 months. I woke up 2 weeks ago in a Kansas hospital. As soon as I was strong enough to travel, I came here. She pulled papers from her coat with shaking hands. This is a letter from the hospital, confirming my identity and my illness. This is my birth certificate. And this, she held up a small journal, is my diary from the train west, where I wrote about meeting a brave woman named Clara Bennett who saved my life. Daniel stood abruptly. This is a trick. Some imposter. Sit down, Mr. Bennett, Sarah said with unexpected steel. You have no idea what Clara did for me. She turned to face the courtroom, her voice growing stronger. I was dying on that train. The fever had me. I was delirious, burning up, and everyone avoided me like plague. Everyone except Clara. She brought me water when I couldn't lift my head. She bathed my fever with cool cloths. She held my hand when I thought I was dying. She gave me her blanket when I shook with cold. Sarah's eyes found Clara in the defendant's chair. When I thought my last moment had come, I told her to take my papers, to have the life I couldn't. I begged her to. It wasn't theft, it was a gift. My dying wish. But you didn't die, Judge Pritchard said, clearly unsettled. No. The fever broke the next day. But I was so weak. I collapsed into a coma that lasted months. By the time I woke, Clara thought I was dead. She was living the life I'd given her permission to live. Sarah turned to the judge. This woman committed no crime. She honored a dying woman's last request. And in doing so, she saved a child's life and brought love back to a broken family. The judge looked at the documents, his confidence wavering. This will need to be verified. It's verified. Thomas stood, his own papers in hand. I've had a telegraph operator confirm with the Kansas hospital. Sarah Mitchell was a patient there for 3 months. She was released 2 weeks ago. Everything she says is true. Before anyone could respond, an elderly Apache woman stood in the back. I speak, even if White Court says no. Madam, you can't, the judge began. My grandson was dying. White doctors said nothing to do. Clara Bennett came to our camp. She knew healing herbs, Apache ways. She saved my grandson's life. This woman is no criminal. She's healer. She's good. A farmer stood next. Clara helped my wife deliver our baby when the doctor couldn't come. Mother and child both lived because of her. Another voice, she taught my children to read, never asked for payment. Then another, she brought food to my family when my husband was sick. The testimonies came faster. People standing throughout the courtroom, sharing stories of Clara's kindness. The prosecuting narrative crumbled with each voice. Nahilzai pushed back into the courtroom, the bailiffs unable to stop him. He walked to the front and spoke in English, his accent thick, but his words precise. I am Nahilzai of the Chiricahua Apache. My people have been pushed from our lands, killed, imprisoned. We know what injustice looks like. This, he gestured at the courtroom, is injustice. You arrest a good woman, while the man who murdered her mother walks free. You call this law, this is not law. This is corruption with a gavel. He turned to Daniel. I have lived 70 winters. I have seen many evil men. But you are among the worst. You hide behind white man's law while your hands are covered in blood. Daniel lunged forward. You savage, You'll what? Nahilzai didn't flinch. Kill me like you killed Mary Bennett, like you beat Clara for 20 years? Your violence is the only truth about you. Thomas stepped forward, his voice ringing with righteous anger. Since you seem reluctant to hear my evidence, Your Honor, let me state it plainly. Daniel Bennett is wanted in 3 other territories for assault, kidnapping, and suspected murder. I have telegrams from law enforcement in Boston, Chicago, and St. Louis. This man is a criminal using fraudulent custody claims to recapture his victim. He slapped documents onto the judge's desk. Mary Bennett's death certificate lists suspicious circumstances. 3 neighbors testified they heard screams the night she died. Daniel fled Boston with Clara the next day. These are the facts you're choosing to ignore. Judge Pritchard's face reddened. These accusations are true, a voice called from the back. The county marshal entered, his badge gleaming. I received those same telegrams this morning. Daniel Bennett, you're under arrest for the murder of Mary Bennett and the kidnapping and assault of Clara Bennett. This is ridiculous. Daniel backed toward the door, but deputies blocked his path. I have rights, I have. You have the right to shut your mouth, the marshal said coldly. Take him. As they dragged Daniel away, his curses echoing. Margaret Ashford stood. Your Honor, regardless of Mr. Bennett's crimes, Clara still committed fraud. Sit down, Margaret. Wade's voice cut through the room. He'd broken free from the deputies and now stood in the center aisle. Everyone here knows what you did. You paid Frank Cooper to arrest us. You hired the investigator to find Clara. You orchestrated this entire thing because I rejected you. Margaret's face flushed. That slander I'll sue. with what the money you embezzled from your husband's estate. The county clerk stood ledger in hand. I've been documenting discrepancies in Mrs. Ashford's financial records for months. She's been skimming funds and bribing officials. I have proof. Margaret's triumphant expression crumbled into panic. You can't prove anything. I can prove everything. The clerk opened his ledger, including the $500 you paid Sheriff Cooper to arrest Clara Bennett and Wade Sullivan on false charges. Frank Cooper tried to slip toward the exit, but Nahilzai blocked his path. Where you going? Sheriff, trial's not over. Judge Pritchard, seeing his benefactor exposed and his own corruption at risk of discovery, made a desperate attempt at control. This court will do justice for once, Thomas interrupted, or every newspaper in the territory will know you took bribes from Margaret Ashford. Your choice, Judge. The silence that followed was absolute. Pritchard looked at the crowd, at the marshal, at the evidence mounting against him, and made his calculation. The charges against Clara Bennett are dismissed, he said quickly. Case closed. Not quite, the marshal said. Sheriff Frank Cooper, you're under arrest for corruption and taking bribes. Margaret Ashford, you're under arrest for embezzlement and obstruction of justice. As they led Margaret and Frank away in chains, Wade moved to Clara. The bailiff unlocked her shackles, and she collapsed into Wade's arms, sobbing. It's over, Wade whispered into her hair. It's really over. But Wade wasn't finished. He helped Clara to her feet and turned to face the entire courtroom. His voice, when he spoke, carried the weight of every hard truth he'd learned. I want everyone here to understand something. When Clara came to my ranch, I saw rags and dirt and thought I'd made a mistake. I was wrong. Dead wrong. He took Clara's scarred hand in his. This woman came with nothing but courage. She didn't ask for fancy dresses or jewelry. She asked for a chance to be free. She worked harder than any person I've ever known. She saved my daughter's life not once, but twice. She brought light back into a house that had been dark for 3 years. Wade's voice grew stronger. I don't care what name she used. I don't care that she ran from hell to find us. I know who she is. She's brave. She's kind. She's the best mother Ellie could ask for. And she's the woman I love. He turned to Clara, his eyes blazing. I choose you. Not because you're perfect, none of us are. I choose you because when I look at you, I see dignity. Real dignity. The kind that can't be bought or sold or inherited. The kind that survives 20 years of abuse and still finds the strength to love. Clara was openly weeping now. Wade cupped her face in his hands. Femme gia, he said, using a word Nahilzai had taught him. Dignity. That's what you have. That's what I choose. Today, tomorrow, and every day after. The courtroom erupted in applause. People who'd whispered cruel things about Clara now wiped their own tears. Even the judge looked moved, though he tried to hide it. Sarah Mitchell approached them, her smile gentle despite her exhaustion. Be happy, she said to Clara. Live the life we both deserved. That's all I ever wanted. Thank you, Clara whispered, for everything. No, thank you. For showing me that kindness still exists in this world. Ellie's small voice interrupted from where the doctor had been examining her. Mama Clara, can we go home now? The word home broke something open in Clara's chest. Wade lifted Ellie carefully and Clara wrapped her arms around them both. "Yes, sweetheart," Clara said through her tears. "We can go home." Nahilzai stood beside Thomas, both men watching the reunion. "Your sister chose well," Nahilzai said. "She did," Thomas agreed. "She finally found her family." As they left the courthouse, the afternoon sun painted everything gold. Wade helped Clara into the wagon, Ellie between them. The child was weak but smiling, her hand gripping Clara's tightly. "I knew you'd come back," Ellie murmured. "Papa said you would, and you did." "Always," Clara promised. "I'll always come back." The ride to the ranch felt like the first breath after drowning. Clara's shorn hair lifted in the breeze, and she didn't care. Wade's hand found hers, and Ellie dozed against her shoulder. They were battered, exhausted, nearly broken, but they were free. They were together. They were home. 10 years passed like a blessing. The Sullivan Ranch became known as Hope Ranch, a place where those with nowhere else to go could find refuge. Clara, now with silver threading through her short hair, taught reading to children from town Apache, white, Mexican, all welcome at her table. Ellie had grown into a strong young woman studying medicine, carrying forward the legacy of healing that had saved her life. Wade and Clara had 2 more children, Thomas Jr. and Mary, named for the siblings who'd fought so hard to bring their family together. On an August afternoon, a wagon arrived carrying a young woman in a tattered dress. Clutching a small bag with frightened eyes, Clara walked down from the porch, remembering another arrival, another chance. She took the woman's trembling hand and said simply, "There's always room here for those who need it. Come inside." Sometimes the greatest families aren't born from blood, but built from the courage to choose love when the world says you're not worthy. Sometimes dignity means standing tall in rags until someone sees your true worth. And sometimes the people who arrive with nothing bring everything we've been missing. That's not just survival, that's grace. What does family mean to you? Have you ever had someone see your worth when others couldn't share your story below? We'd love to hear it.